My mother lifted her wine glass at Christmas dinner and smiled at everyone around the table. Then looked directly at me and said, "We're ashamed of you." Everyone laughed, but none of them knew I was about to destroy the lie this family had lived inside for years. At 8:11 p.m., the laughter still echoed across the dining room. Small laughs. Controlled laughs. The kind people use when they know something is cruel, but laugh anyway because it's safer. I sat completely still at the end of the Christmas table. Hands folded quietly beside my untouched plate. Across from me, my mother smiled into her wine glass like she'd just delivered the perfect joke. "We're ashamed of you." She said it casually, like commenting on the weather. At 8:12 p.m., my brother Tyler looked down immediately. My sister Emily covered her mouth, pretending to laugh harder than she actually was. My aunt reached for more wine. Nobody defended me. Nobody ever did. The Christmas lights reflected softly against the crystal dishes while Bing Crosby played quietly through hidden speakers. Everything looked perfect. That mattered to my mother more than anything. Perfect table. Perfect decorations. Perfect family. Except me. At 8:13 p.m., she pointed her fork toward me again. "You know, Nora was always difficult," she told the table with a smile. More small laughs. I stared calmly at the candle flickering near my plate. Because this wasn't new. Not really. When I was 8, she threw away a drawing I made for her because it looked messy. When I earned a scholarship, she called me lucky. When my first startup failed, she told relatives I warned her she wasn't realistic. Every achievement became an accident. Every mistake became proof. At 8:15 p.m., my phone buzzed beside my glass. A notification from my lawyer. I didn't open it yet. My mother noticed the screen light immediately. "You still doing those little business projects?" she asked sweetly. There it was. That tone. The one designed to shrink me. I took a slow sip of water. "Something like that." She smiled wider. "Oh, good. At least you're staying busy." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He knew. Not everything. But enough. At 8:16 p.m., my mother stood slowly from her seat holding her wine glass dramatically. She loved performances. Especially during holidays. "I just think families should be honest with each other," she announced loudly. The room quieted instantly. Dangerous quiet. Then her eyes locked onto me again. "Nora always thought she was better than everyone here." My aunt nodded immediately. Emily avoided eye contact. I stayed calm. That irritated her more than anger ever could. At 8:17 p.m., she walked slowly behind my chair. One hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Cold fingers. Fake affection. But honestly, she continued softly. She embarrasses this family. The room went silent again. Then someone laughed. Then another. Tiny obedient laughs spreading around the table. Exactly what she wanted. My chest tightened for half a second. Not from pain. From clarity. Because suddenly, I realized something important. She didn't humiliate me because I was weak. She humiliated me because she needed me beneath her. At 8:18 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Daniel. The transfer finalized. It's officially yours now. I stared at the screen quietly. Then locked the phone again. My mother noticed the tiny smile that touched my face. Her expression shifted immediately. Suspicion. "What's funny?" she asked sharply. I looked up slowly. For the first time all night, I didn't feel small. I looked around the table carefully. At the expensive decorations my mother couldn't actually afford. At the house she constantly bragged about. At the relatives who treated cruelty like entertainment. Then back at her. And suddenly, I stopped being afraid of ruining Christmas. At 8:19 p.m., my mother slowly removed her hand from my shoulder. She sensed it. Something changing. The room felt tighter now. Warmer. Like the air itself knew something was coming. "What exactly is so amusing?" she asked again. Her smile stayed in place. But her eyes looked nervous. I picked up my napkin calmly. Folded it once beside my plate. Then looked directly at her. "You really want honesty tonight?" The table went silent immediately. Tyler stopped chewing. Emily lowered her wine glass slowly. My mother laughed softly. "Oh please," she said. "Don't start acting dramatic." Dramatic. That word again. The label she used every time I reacted like a human being. At 8:20 p.m., I stood up slowly. My chair scraped softly against the hardwood floor. Nobody moved. Not even my mother. Because for the first time, I wasn't shrinking to protect her comfort. "You spent years telling everyone I was unstable," I said quietly. Her smile tightened instantly. "Nora, you mocked me when my company failed." My voice stayed calm. Controlled. "But you never told them why it failed." Tyler finally looked up at me fully now. Confused. My mother crossed her arms. "Because nobody cares about your excuses." I almost smiled. Because she still thought this conversation belonged to her. At 8:21 p.m., I picked up my phone from the table. Unlocked it slowly. Then turned the screen toward Tyler first. His eyes scanned the document. Then widened immediately. "What the hell?" Emily leaned closer. "What?" Tyler looked pale now. "Nora." My mother stepped forward sharply. "What is that?" I turned the phone toward her. "Property transfer documents. Bank records. Late mortgage notices. Everything. Every hidden debt attached to this perfect house." The smile disappeared from her face instantly. At 8:22 p.m., nobody spoke. The Christmas music still played quietly in the background. Soft jazz. Silver bells. Meanwhile, my mother stared at the screen like it was a loaded weapon. "You went through my finances?" she whispered. There it was. Not shame. Not regret. Fear. I lowered the phone slowly. "No," I said calmly. "I bought the debt." The room froze. Completely. My aunt blinked hard. Emily stepped backward slowly. Tyler looked between us like he stopped understanding reality. My mother laughed once. Short. Nervous. "That doesn't even make sense." I reached into my purse quietly. Pulled out a thin folder. Then placed it carefully beside the Christmas centerpiece. Legal documents. Signatures. Transfer confirmations. Every page carried my name. Nora Hart. At 8:24 p.m., my mother grabbed the papers instantly. Her hands trembled while flipping through them. "No." She whispered it twice. Then louder. "No. This isn't real." I watched her carefully. Because suddenly, the woman who controlled every room looked fragile. Small. Human. "You said I embarrassed the family," I replied softly. "So I stopped protecting it." Tyler leaned heavily against the counter now. Emily covered her mouth silently. Because piece by piece, they were realizing something horrifying. The house wasn't fully theirs anymore. At 8:25 p.m., my mother finally looked up at me. Actually looked at me. Not like a child. Not like a failure. Like someone dangerous. "What did you do?" she whispered. I held her gaze calmly. "The same thing you taught me." Silence. I adjusted my coat sleeve slowly. I learned how to survive quietly. At 8:26 p.m., nobody touched their food anymore. The Christmas dinner sat cold across the table. Ham untouched. Wine glasses half full. Candles burning lower by the second. My mother still gripped the papers tightly in both hands. Like squeezing them harder might change what they said. "This is insane," she whispered. Tyler stepped closer carefully. "What does this even mean?" I looked toward the staircase slowly. Then back at the table. "It means the house was months away from foreclosure." Dead silence. Emily blinked rapidly. "What?" My mother snapped toward her instantly. "Don't listen to her. Too fast. Too defensive." That was answer enough. At 8:27 p.m., I opened another file on my phone. Late payment notices. Default warnings. Collection emails. Every ignored bill. Every hidden problem. Tyler stared at the screen in disbelief. "You told us everything was fine." My mother's breathing changed immediately. Sharp. Uneven. Because her real nightmare wasn't losing money. It was losing control of the story. At 8:28 p.m., she pointed at me suddenly. "You went digging through my private life." I almost laughed. "No," I replied calmly. "The bank did." That hit harder than shouting ever could. Emily sat down slowly at the table. Her face looked pale now. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. I answered honestly. "Bad enough that strangers were about to own this house by February." The room completely collapsed after that. Not physically. Emotionally. Because every Christmas memory hanging on those walls suddenly felt unstable. At 8:29 p.m., my mother slammed the folder onto the table. "You think this makes you better than me?" There it was. The real fear. Not debt. Not exposure. Replacement. I shook my head slowly. This was never about being better. My voice stayed soft. Steady. It was about surviving you. Nobody moved. Not even her. At 8:30 p.m., Tyler rubbed both hands over his face. "All these years," he muttered quietly. Then he looked at Mom. "You lied to us." She looked stunned hearing it from him. Because Tyler was always loyal. Always careful. Always afraid of disappointing her. But now even he looked uncertain. At 8:31 p.m., my mother's eyes filled suddenly. Not dramatic tears. Angry tears. "You have no idea what I sacrificed for this family." I stared at her for a long second. Then nodded once. "You're right." The room held its breath. "Because you never let anyone else matter enough to find out." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that exposes everything people spent years avoiding. At 8:32 p.m., her phone started ringing. Mortgage company. The screen lit brightly across the table. Nobody missed it. Nobody could pretend anymore. She declined the call instantly. But the damage was already done. Emily slowly looked around the dining room. At the expensive decorations. At the giant tree. At the luxury her mother constantly showed off online. Then back at me. "You bought the debt," she whispered again. I nodded once. 6 months ago. That shocked them more than anything. Because while they spent years laughing at me, I was quietly becoming the person keeping this family from collapsing. At 8:33 p.m., my mother suddenly looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not powerful. Not elegant. Just tired. And for one dangerous second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the laughter. The wine glass in her hand. The way everyone joined in while she called me an embarrassment. And the feeling disappeared instantly. At 8:34 p.m., I picked up my purse slowly. My mother noticed immediately. "You're leaving?" I looked directly at her. Yes. Her eyes widened slightly. You can't just destroy this family and walk away. That sentence almost made me laugh. Because deep down, we both knew the truth. I wasn't the one who broke this family. I was just the first person who stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. At 8:35 p.m., nobody tried to stop me. Not immediately. I slipped my phone into my coat pocket slowly while Christmas music continued playing softly through the speakers like the house itself still believed this was a normal holiday dinner. It wasn't. Not anymore. My mother stood frozen beside the table gripping the legal papers so tightly they bent at the corners. You planned this? She asked quietly. I looked at her calmly. No. I reached for my purse. I prepared for reality. That hurt her more than anger would have. Because for years, she controlled every room by controlling appearances. Perfect family photos. Perfect dinners. Perfect stories. And tonight, all of it cracked open in front of witnesses. At 8:36 p.m., Tyler stood suddenly. Nora, wait. I paused near the hallway. He looked shaken. Actually shaken. You really saved the house? I nodded once. The room stayed silent again. Because suddenly the embarrassment sitting at the end of the table had become the only reason they still had a home. Emily looked close to tears now. You never told us, she whispered. I almost smiled sadly. You never asked. Nobody argued with that. Not even my mother. At 8:37 p.m., she slowly sat back down in her chair. The same chair she ruled from every Christmas. But now she looked different sitting there. Smaller somehow. Like power had quietly left the room without her noticing. You wanted me to fail, I said softly. Her eyes lifted immediately. Nora. You needed me to fail. The truth landed heavily across the table. Because suddenly everyone could see it. Every joke. Every insult. Every moment she reduced me in front of other people. It was never discipline. It was fear. Fear that if I became strong enough, I'd stop needing her. And she was right. At 8:38 p.m., tears slipped down her face quietly. Real tears this time. Not dramatic. Not performative. Just human. I was trying to protect you, she whispered weakly. I stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly shook my head. No. My voice stayed calm. You were trying to control me. Nobody moved after that. The Christmas lights flickered softly across the walls while the entire room sat trapped inside the truth for the first time. At 8:39 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Another call from the bank. She looked at it. Then at me. And suddenly, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of protecting her image. Tired of shrinking to keep peace. Tired of pretending humiliation was love. At 8:40 p.m., I stepped toward the front door. My mother's voice cracked behind me. Nora. I stopped. Not because she asked. Because I wanted to hear what came next. For the first time in my entire life, she sounded afraid of losing me. I'm sorry, she whispered. The room froze. Even Tyler looked shocked hearing those words. I closed my eyes briefly. Not from emotion. From exhaustion. Because apologies arriving 20 years late carry a strange weight. At 8:41 p.m., I opened the front door slowly. Cold winter air rushed inside immediately. Snow drifted quietly under the streetlights outside. Peaceful. Still. Everything this house never was. I looked back one final time. At the untouched Christmas dinner. At my siblings sitting silently. At my mother crying quietly at the center of the table she once controlled like a throne. Then I finally understood something important. Breaking the cycle feels violent to people who benefited from your silence. I stepped outside, closed the door softly behind me, and walked into the snow feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't need revenge. They had already lost everything.